It is, or it was, a chicken heart.
Chicken heart? Are you crazy, man?
Chicken heart! Yes, chicken heart, I tell you. Chicken heart! Listen to me, you fools! Listen!
There you are. Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to introduce myself. I am Mr. Matuchek of Matuchek and Company, the shop around the corner.
So, Chicken Heart Productions is back, podcast in black and white. Before we get to the movie, let's do our introductions. John Grisolano.
Mary Grisolano.
Jenny Grisolano.
Mike Grisolano.
Joe, not Grisolano.
Julie Grisolano.
We are the Chicken Heart podcast in black and white, Chicken Heart Productions, and we talk about old movies in this podcast. We're going to give our mandatory spoiler alert.
Go get him, Chicken Heart. Go get him.
We're going to talk about everything we want to talk about. If you don't want to know what's going to happen, don't listen right now. Come back and listen later after you watch the movie. So Mary, take it away.
Thank you, John. So I chose The Shop Around the Corner, which is kind of little too, because
It's actually a pretty big shop.
it is a pretty big shop. I find it to be a charming Christmas movie, and I was thinking about it this morning. Being this late, it's also a good Valentine's Day movie for Valentine's Day weekend, so it worked out beautifully. The Shop Around the Corner was...
Way to put a good spin on it.
Yeah.
That's good.
Shop Around the Corner was released by MGM in January 12th, 1940. And it's set in Budapest pre-World War II. And the basic setting is a little shop in Budapest owned by Mr. Matuchek with a handful of quirky employees, including Jimmy Stewart, who plays Alfred Kralik. And then you also have a sort of sleazy co-worker named Vadis. He's got a friend who's Polish, whose name is Pirovich.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart's friend is Pirovich.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart's friend is Pirovich, and a precocious shop boy named Pepe.
Oh,
and
Pepe,
oh yeah, of course Frank Morgan is who plays Matuchek.
He's the shop owner, Mr. Matuchek. Frank Morgan, for probably most listeners, if they hear this, will only know Frank Morgan from one movie, and who is he?
He's the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Of course.
He played Oz in the...
Hey, no attention to the man behind the curtain.
He's also the guy that opens the door at the gates of Oz.
Yeah, he has several roles
and
in
he drives
Wizard
the
of
horses
Oz.
in it.
But that's by far his most famous role now. But he was a regular character actor in this period. He made many movies, but this is...
Shop Around the Corner is a classic. It was remade a lesser well-known remake called You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. This one is by far the superior film. So it starts at...
the name of the store in You Got Mail is The Shop Around the Corner.
Is it?
That's the name of her store. The store that she owns, the bookstore, is The Shop Around the Corner. So it's a little homage.
I've never seen it.
You're not missing anything.
And that's coming from Julie. Just how bad that is.
So,
Julie likes many
a bad romantic.
Yes, that means you can tell that this is a terrible movie.
Yeah.
I like romance, and I thought that was terrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
So right away you see that Kralik... Two things. You see that Kralik is in a pen pal relationship with a woman that he's quite taken with, Clara Novak, played by Margaret Sullivan. And
but he doesn't know that.
Met yet. And he doesn't know that. It's an anonymous. And you also know that Kralik, Jimmy Stewart, is the oldest and most trusted employee of Matuchek. And the movie starts off with everybody wanting to know how Kralik's dinner with Matuchek went the night before, and how delicious it was, and what an opulent feast it was. When the store opens and everyone starts to work, Clara Novak, Margaret Sullivan's character, comes into the store looking for a job, and Jimmy Stewart sort of brushes her off. And
well, actually, before that, because this is kind of important, is he has a cigar case.
Right. So Matuchek has purchased cigar cases that, when you open them, play O Chichonia. And Jimmy Stewart's character, Kralik, says, that's a horrible idea. If you smoke 20 cigarettes a day, that means 20 times a day you're opening up this cigarette case and you're listening to this song. And Matuchek just, don't you like O Chichonia? And he said, I do, but I wouldn't like it 20 times a day every time I want a cigarette. when Claire Novak comes into the store looking for a job and Kralik shoos her off, Matichek comes out, and to impress him, she's able to sell the cigarette case to a woman who's looking at it. And ironically, the woman thinks it's a candy jar, and she said, oh no, I don't think that I could listen to Ochichonia every time I want to get a candy. And she says, that's the whole point of it, is that every time you hear the song, it says, not another bite, And she sells it to this woman. So Matichek places
And
the
more
love
than
song.
the cost.
And more than
Way more
he
than they were
wants
going to sell
yeah.
it for, yeah.
So she gets the job. Matichek places a huge order for these cigarette cases that going.
They're still sitting in the window. That's one of the
at
little
the end of the
in-jokes.
movie. Mhm.
Like, time passes, and there's a whole window display. A month or... by Christmas
half
time, they
off.
still have them all half off sitting in
Yeah.
the window.
Yeah.
A whole stack of them.
Right.
One thing, before you go on with the story, one is struck with the amount of everyone that works in the store, that is either a clerk or except for Pepe. It's like this is their real job. This isn't a halfway job to something else. This all seems to be sort of normal. That this.
Well, it's
sort
also the time period that it was taking place in. I mean, during this time period, that would have been a really good job to have. And it's
Yeah,
career.
but that's what I mean is
Yeah.
that these people are all dressed very nicely, and this is a real.
It's more like a high end.
It's
Yeah.
funny you're touching on. I almost, this was a theme or one of the things I like, and it was something I'm glad you mentioned. The remake, the more was that made in the late '90s or something. The Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks, because it was one of the reasons I had always held off from seeing that. And maybe we should talk about this in our reviews, but why not? We've always said we should do thematic discussions and things. We don't have to just follow a plot.
No, I agree.
One of the things I've always liked about this movie, and I'm not terribly romantic, it's not really the romance, but I like the... What I like is, and you're sort of touching on it, Mike, is this is a movie about little people, and these people are very ordinary, which is somewhat unusual in movies in general. I mean, sometimes they beat you over the head with it. We're giving you a real life, it's a little story about little people with little problems, and they're very like none of them are perfect. None of them are the most beautiful people in the world. Even Jimmy Stewart, if you think he's handsome, I've never thought of Jimmy Stewart as like a sex icon or something. He's not Clark
Well, I mean,
Gable
that
or
is the female.
Cary
She's
Grant.
pretty, but she's not.
Right, they're all. I mean, he even said like when
They're
he talks
normal
about
people.
the girl, they're ordinary people, and they have ordinary little problems, and I like that. Like they're shop clerks. But to your point, you're absolutely right. In that world at that time, you could make a living being a shop clerk. Or one of my favorite examples is in the film, The Best Years of Our Lives. If you guys remember that,
Yeah.
these people come home. These GIs are come home from the war, and like you could make a living as a soda jerk. That was the guy who ran the soda fountain. Kids buy like that. Dana Andrews' character in that movie, for example, he goes back. I think he works at a pharmacy.
He does.
And he's not a pharmacist. Okay, now pharmacists are six-figure jobs or whatever in our culture, our economy.
Mr.
But
Gower wasn't though.
Yeah, Mr. Gower was. But I mean, he's a soda jerk at the pharmacy or whatever, and that was a living. You could make a living in that world. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But I like this movie because these are little people.
Yes, and
These are soda jerks, and these are shop clerks, and
Be so though, and that's what the other thing that I always found very interesting in re-seeing it as an adult is that Margaret O'Sullivan, if that's her name, Sullivan, when she's sick, laying up in bed, and I know I'm sure you're gonna get to that. She's lying in bed in obviously like this rented place. She's in this one little small sort of dingy room, and yet she's not. This isn't made to seem pathetic or sad.
No.
Like when Jimmy Stewart loses his job, the only thing that you're sad about is that he doesn't have a position now, and they say that he doesn't have a position now to maybe get married. And it's not that, oh, he lost his job as a sales clerk. Oh, good for you. Go on to something greater and higher. It's that you're
no, that's not the aspiration.
Not the aspiration.
Well, actually, most of them feel lucky to have a job.
Yes.
Most of them, they make several allusions to how tough it is. It's
pretty high unemployment rate. I guess.
high unemployment. Yeah,
What
it's
year was
difficult.
This was like 39.
Pre-World War II.
Pre-World
But
War
it's at
II.
the end of the Great Depression.
This still
But
the,
it's in Budapest, so it's a different.
but there were similar problems going on. I mean, there would have been similar problems.
There would have been similar
in
economic
Europe.
problems.
They're all,
But-
and Mr. Matichek, they're all kind of, yes, Mr. Matichek, yes, Mr. Matichek.
Oh, and they all look up to him. He's hugely. You can see the stat of the class difference
Yeah.
between them. But when you think about it, like he's just a little shop owner.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not the Walton family owning Walmart, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
He's not a billionaire. I mean, he would be to us like upper middle class, you know. He eats off a nice dining set and he gets to eat well. But I mean, he's not the
He's not
heir of
rich.
some giant fortune or something.
Right.
He's not a tycoon. He's not Anthony Kirby. Okay, from the last movie we watched. He's not Anthony P. Kirby. He's not that level. He's just he's okay. But that adds to the charm of this, and it was one of the reasons I was always a little leery of watching the Tom Hanks one, because from what I understood, like, isn't he some sort of .com executive or
He's
she's
like a Barnes and Noble tycoon.
Oh, he's a rich guy,
He's
though.
a rich guy. So
Yeah,
it
and it's
totally
like that-
changes that
to
dynamic.
me that-
the little shop around the corner is going to be put down because like a Borders is moving in.
Oh, all right.
That's
And see that to me, like the whole point of the story, or is for me, big attraction of the story is it's not just it's a romance story. These are little people, and this is their lives. You get a little snippet of their lives, a little time period. If you see their little drama and what's going
and
on.
they've
in
been
this.
working there for years.
Yeah.
Like Jimmy Stewart's been there for like
9 years.
Carl-
9 years or
Carlick
something.
has been, yeah.
Like he's been there.
Was
And
this
his
originally a
friend
play?
supports-
Out of
it was.
curiosity?
It was originally a Hungarian play.
Yeah.
And his friend,
Burbage.
Perovich, supports a family.
Yes, that's made a point of, because he says to him, "How do you live off this?"
Now, how much did it cost you to live? You and Mrs. Pirovich, leaving out the children.
Well, why fool yourself?
Well, let's say temporarily. How much it cost?
Well, it can be done.
Yeah?
Yes, and very nicely.
Explaining how he and his 2 kids and his wife live, because he's considering, as part of the plot, you find out, as Mary said, that Jimmy Stewart's character, Kralik, is hoping to marry his pen pal romance, and is now wondering if he can, who would he live?
And that's the next part of the film, actually, is that so you see a few scenes with Kralik and Clara not getting along, and they can't stand each other in person, even though you as the audience knows that they are actually each other's secret pen pal. They call each other dear friend. They don't know. They don't realize it. So Kralik, Jimmy Stewart, is going to go meet her at a cafe. She's going to have a red carnation with her book, and he tells his friend Pirovich, if I would be a fool not to marry her, the most wonderful girl in the world. And when he goes there, No, Matichek tells everybody they have to stay late.
Yeah.
And Kralik goes to Matichek and says he can't stay late, he has plans. And Matichek, who's been crabby with him for months, ends up firing him. And you as the audience find out very quickly that it's because he believes that somebody's having an affair with his wife, and he thinks it's Kralik, and it's not. But Kralik gets fired. And so then he goes to meet Clara Novak at the cafe, and his friend, you were doing this. Who was quoting this earlier? Do you like Clara Novak? Well, if you don't like Clara
I
Novak,
just
you're
did
not going to like her. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Why not?
it is Clara
Because it
Novak.
is Miss Novak.
He's actually my favorite character in the movie.
Pirovich? Yeah.
Pirovich has got some great lines.
I like him.
You live in the bedroom.
Where do you eat?
In the kitchen. You get a nice big kitchen.
Well, where do you entertain?
Entertain? What are you, an ambassador? Who do you want to entertain? Listen, if someone is really your friend, he comes after dinner.
He's a good character. So Kralik goes into the cafe and meets Clara Novak, who of course doesn't realize that Kralik is her dear friend, and she's horrible to him, and she says mean and nasty things.
She doesn't want him to sit. He sits at the table her table, and she's anxious to have him up so that if her dear friend arrives, that he won't be blocking the seats. But she's very mean to him. And I have to say at this point, you understand why he, throughout this movie, might be sore with her, because she's always kind of mean to him. But aside from her always saying how he's mean to her, he's never actually mean to her. And my experience was that it's sort of a, let's
he
say
picks on
that,
her a little bit.
well,
doesn't he?
I mean, as
No,
much as
he
Jimmy
doesn't.
Stewart
She
is with,
thinks he does.
She makes some references to it.
she makes references,
but
but
you
never
don't see it.
He is
He
always nice.
criticizes her outfits because he thinks they're inappropriate for work. They're
But-
too bold and flamboyant. And so she, that whole scene where, do you like my shirt? Do you like my
Right,
shirt? Do you like my shirt?
right.
She
But
asks
even
everybody,
what I mean is
you
that
know?
they never. She has to say he said that. In the movie, they never show him ever
They don't show
mean to
it.
her.
Yeah, they don't show.
Miss Novak,
Yes, Mr. Kralik?
I noticed that you wore a yellow blouse with light green dots yesterday.
No, Mr. Kralik. As usual, you were mistaken. It was a green blouse with light yellow dots. And everybody else thought it very becoming. And I don't remember ever remarking about your neckties. And believe me, Mr. Kralik, if you think I couldn't say anything about your neckties, just ask Mr. Vadish. So please leave my blouse alone. It's none of your business.
But you can tell that he's hard on her in the movie just by his demeanor towards her whenever she's around in the shop.
That's true. He's like a stern big brother or
Yeah,
something. with
but
her.
he does that too with Miss Matacek. Like he's blunt about the cigarette. Even Matacek says, "Do you ever agree? Why do I have you?" Like he's sort of like complaining at him. Why do I have you here? You know everything I say. You just like you seem to get the sense that he's sort of. I'm just saying that Jimmy Stewart's kind of himself, and they do make a point of showing how she can be kind of snippy with him. And you're right. He even at that one seat when she says, "You're nothing but
an insignificant little clerk." That stings him
That clearly
because
bothers
he had been wrestling with that. You know,
He's not
he's not
even
even an
clerk.
insignificant
Clerk
little
is
clerk.
fired.
I always like that because again, it adds to their like little. These are little people with little problems, but it's huge to them. It's like it's their lives are happening here, and so he is just a little clerk. During their romance or discovery, I always felt like he's feeling her out. He wants to see what her reaction's going to be to a lot of these things. So that's why he frequently is deliberately downplaying himself. Built himself up in these letters, but then in person, I always took it as like he wants to see like, is she going to be okay with this? Like, because later on when he's going through the whole thing with Felix Popkin and all that, and he wants to see her reaction, I always felt like he's sort of feeling her out. He's teasing her, but he also wants to gauge her reaction.
Well,
like
and
what
set
she
the bar
can.
lower than where
Yes.
she's at, of course.
Yeah.
A key moment when about going back a little bit in the story is Matacek does find out that someone's having an affair with his wife, but it's not Kralik. It's
Schildkraut.
It's Vadis.
Yeah, Vadish.
Yeah, it's the slimy, and I've seen him in something.
It's Joseph Schildkraut. You know him from the Cheaters.
Yeah,
And
he's very oily and greasy. My favorite little bit with him, which is a sidebar, is anytime anybody says anything around him, somebody would say, I don't know, it's kind of, this coat's just not very warm. Does Mr. Matacek not pay you enough to buy a warm coat? That's not actually what it's. I didn't say that. There were 3 people here. The impression that he's a rat, right? That
Yes.
he's always running to Mr. Matacek, telling on people. You find out he's the one who's actually having the affair. And
even in the scene when Jimmy Stewart becomes the manager, and Vadish doesn't at first completely know that or understand it, and he's Jimmy Stewart's like doing his blunt stuff, like I never liked you, and he's like, well, I appreciate your honesty. We can he's still sucking, like he's doing his best to suck up and still maintain.
he's a butt kisser.
Oh,
Completely.
the
Complete
thing
round
about
over.
that is that his boss had requested that he lets him go discreetly.
Yes.
And he did it way opposite of discreetly.
Yeah, he was mean to Vadish.
He did it very publicly. And
I
very,
found that. I enjoyed that. I mean, to
did you?
John's point, it's true. None of these characters are perfect, and I kind of like that
Because I actually felt in that moment, the
stick
first time I felt pity for Vadish was when he realizes the jig is up and he's trying. I don't know.
Yeah, he's pretty desperate. I mean, he's
Yeah.
trying to hold on to it. He's taking a lot of guff from Jimmy Stewart. I mean,
Yeah,
we're a
hold
far
on to
cry
this.
from, your opposite characters in John movies where, Humphrey Bogart had just punched Jimmy Stewart in the nose for talking to him that way, even if he is having an affair with his wife or whatever. Whereas in this, I mean, Vadish is like practically licking his boots.
Because he doesn't want to lose
Please
his
don't
position.
fire me. Yeah, I mean, basically, he doesn't quite beg. To your point, he's almost pathetic.
Yes.
He's practically begging.
And you don't know. It's never clear. Now we know that he's doing something. Just to give the backdrop, Matacek's wife is calling him up for money. Vadish is showing up with fine clothes. And
so everybody
loose.
else is dressed very, very simply, and he's always
He's now coming in.
slick.
He takes a cab to
taxi
work.
cab, which is a big deal.
Yeah,
about
it's
that.
a big deal. He takes a cab. Remember that to work, and they're all like, "What the heck? How does he afford to take cabs to work?"
So you don't know what exactly. I mean, you presume something not right is going on with the wife, but they never.
My assumption is always
He's having
that
an
he's a kept
affair.
man.
Yeah, that's what I always understood too. He's having an affair with her.
Okay.
She's footing the bill for him.
Because
I didn't know if it was
Matacek
just-
tries to kill himself. A private eye comes to Matacek's office and explains it, and that it's Vadish,
And
and
Pepe
Matichek goes to, and
right.
Pepe finds him and stops him, and Pepe is
Well, that's a whole other element. This movie is not a light. Sort of like It's a Wonderful Life. There's a dark. When that scene happens, you're like, "Whoa, this isn't quite what I thought this."
right.
No,
No,
it's
Mr. Bonacek,
absolutely-
don't! You're a gun go off, and he's ready to.
It's like it took a dark turn quick.
Oh yeah, you're like, this isn't just Wizard of. I mean, even Wizard
No,
of Oz is
no,
creepy,
no.
But anyway,
Yeah.
it's so it's got these sort of sad and depressing.
I've seen this movie several times, but this does have that tie-in again of suicide as a factor in this
Yes.
movie, which I had never. I mean, and I said it never quite clicked, but you're absolutely right. There's a huge dark element in this movie, and I think that adds to the attraction as well.
So if you're
Is
gonna-
these are desperate. Yeah, I mean, these are said ordinary people with desperate. It feels very real in some sense. It doesn't feel totally like Hollywood.
Yes,
you
even
know.
as they're doing the cigarette box scene, where you realize, like, woven in behind this, though, like even the woman. Let's look at Clara, who's really wants to find this man. Her own desperate, as he's describing him at the end. Jimmy Stewart's
Yeah.
describing the
Poppin.
parent, Mr. Poppin.
Popkin,
Popkin.
this made-up guy. that
Yeah, and you can just see it kind of unraveling for
Yes.
her, like like
Yeah.
she's trying to put a good face on things, but it's like, and then sad Mr. Pierre. I have to say, Mr. Matichek by the end.
He's pathetic too.
Oh, he
Yeah.
becomes pathetic.
They all become pathetic in a way. They're pathetic. I mean,
But
Yeah.
that's funny. I wouldn't say pathetic as much as he's vulnerable, and he has a sweet ending because he has dinner with.
yeah,
the
he
shop
does.
boy.
But I mean, they because it's Christmas and there is something there. But I mean, he's a lonely man. He's all alone.
Yeah.
He's got not despite his this shop. He makes the point of but basically this was my life. This shop, and now here
Yes,
he
you
is.
get the sense he's blaming himself.
He doesn't
now
seem
that
to have
maybe
children.
My
and-
wife didn't
Yep.
love me because maybe he had a little bit of the Ebenezer Scrooge thing going where
Right.
Yeah, we
will
don't
you be
know.
happy in the life you've chosen. Yeah. And the little boy, at the end, he's got no family around, and poor Matichek's going to take him out for a meal.
So he's going out with a stranger, basically. A little. I mean, so that was nice. He's making a nice gesture, but I mean, you're still struck. There's still going to be tomorrow morning, and Mr. Matichek is alone. I realize it sounds creepy now.
No,
The
you
way
know
I
what?
just
No,
say
it
that
doesn't mean that,
he's out with the little boy, and they'll be tomorrow
Well,
morning.
he's not that little boy. I mean, he's
The
like
shop
a
boy.
Oh, he's a 16-year-old.
I think the shop
The
boy
shop
moves in with
boy.
Mr. Matichek, and Matichek raises him as his own.
Yeah,
Oh,
They
okay.
become their own little sitcom.
Yeah, I
They'll be like
definitely
different
got
strokes.
strokes.
Matichek and son. Yeah.
Well, no,
Father,
Silver
son,
Spoons,
now.
right?
Silver
Matichek,
Yeah.
an adopted son. Yeah.
They'll have to find like another little boy. They'll call him Webster.
So, if you were to do a character assessment, Pirovich seems to be the most stable and likable, and he's the one who is most. Matichek treats him the worst.
He does.
He's like Jerry from Parks and Recreation. If you've ever seen that show, like the guy who just keeps plucking along and he's happy as can be, even though everybody just dogs him. the
And
whole
his
time.
name's not even Jerry.
His name's not even Jerry.
Everybody just calls him Jerry.
His name is Gary.
But in real life, in the show, he's married to Chrissy
Well,
Brinkley.
I would say though one of the things that's so admirable about Kralik, Jimmy Stewart's character, is that everybody else licks Matichek's boots because of that desperation and their need to hold
That's
on to
true.
the job. And Kralik is
doesn't.
the only one who will just say it straight, which is why before Matichek is suspicious of him, you get the impression that's what he
He valued him
values
above all
and
the others.
respects in him, is that he will actually bravely, if you think about it, given the fact that Matichek has a temper,
You can't expect me to make up my mind in 5 minutes. Well, if that's the case, then I'll have to say no. Sorry.
he bravely will speak the truth.
Because it's even like the cigarette cases. He won't buy the cigarette cases
Yeah.
because he says, hey, no, this is stupid, don't do it. And he's like, argues, kind of like he's the owner. He can do whatever
Yeah.
he wants, but he feels like he has to justify it to his head salesman.
I want your honest opinion. Your honest opinion.
Everybody runs away.
Pirovich is always walking away. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some good themes that this story is beautifully written because very simple moments. It's one of those stories where a very simple moment can tell you so much. Like when I want your honest opinion, and he runs away. You immediately know that there's a lack of trust there. Or I didn't say that. I didn't say that. There were witnesses here that no, I didn't say
Yeah,
that.
you know, it's interesting, like then because they never show you per se. That
No,
you just
but then
see
you just
there's
know.
obviously some long history here that they can just reference, and you get it
It
immediately.
seems like they've all
very
been
well
there
written.
for like
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
so they know each other backwards and
Whereas
forwards.
if they did this today, we'd have to have a flashback origin story
Right.
showing you the first time this occurred. Whereas in this, it's
Well-
just dropped in as part of
I
the.
think it helps that the screenplay was written off of an actual play.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Well, definitely. I mean, it works.
Yeah.
It just assumes you're gonna get it.
because you could watch this movie, you could actually set the whole movie in just
The shot.
the shot.
Yeah, you could.
Oh, right.
It
yeah.
does have very few settings.
Yeah, the shop,
Well, there's
the
the
coffee
shop,
shop,
the
and then
coffee,
her,
and the
Her
hospital.
bedroom.
her bedroom.
And the
And the
hospital.
hospital
hospital.
before scene.
Which is actually the next section of the movie. Kralik,
And
after
this-
Matichek tries to
And the scenes that are not the shop are all two-person scenes
right
that could be set in.
downstage, yeah. Kralik goes to visit Matichek in the hospital, and Matichek apologizes, and they have a nice moment. Matichek says, "Will you be the store manager while I recover?" And Kralik says he wills. Matichek, this is what you were talking about, Joe. Matichek says to Kralik, "Please fire
Vadish.
Vadish quietly,
He
discreetly."
tells him exactly what
And he
happened.
tells him what happened, and of course, Kralik's anger gets the better of him, and he fires him in a very humiliating way.
Doesn't he like push him into the cigar?
He
case?
pushes
This
him
is
through
cigarette-
the
cigarette-
infamous cigar, right.
cigarette
Yeah,
cases.
that are all half off. And then fast forward to a couple weeks later to Christmas, and the store has been running beautifully under Kralik's lead, and it's Matichek's first night back, so he comes back to see the hustle and bustle of his store and all the money they're making, and he gives everybody big bonuses, and this is the point where he's lonely, and he asks everybody if they have dinner plans, and everybody has plans. to
And doesn't he?
visit
I mean, does he
house.
literally ask like practically everyone
He
in
has
the shop?
actually everybody there.
Every person in the
And
shop.
everybody has
some plans.
Everybody has somewhere to be except for the new errand boy. So Peppy, who saved his life, gets
I
promoted.
was hoping we could discuss Peppy. What were your thoughts on Peppy?
Peppy's goofy. He's
Peppy
he's
would
comedic
walk
relief.
over your dead body to move up in that store.
That was the sense I had.
Like,
You wouldn't like to speak by any chance to Mr. Vadish? That got her. Draw your own conclusions.
He's young. I tell you, he's young, ambitious.
he's a character you don't
Um,
see in movies today. That whippersnapper, quick talking type of character.
Yeah.
You don't see that in movies today. Today, it'd be more of an angry, creepy guy who would.
Yeah.
Meet Pepe, played by William Tracy.
Mr. Clark, do you think I have to work tonight, too? After all, I'm a child.
You know what I'm saying?
He's that sort of old-fashioned kid pulling himself, literally to pulling
Almost
himself
like
up.
he should be in Newsies or something.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just that very
Selling a
ambitious,
penny a paper.
clever, quick talking, quick thinking. You're right. You wouldn't necessarily trust him so much because I agree.
He'd do the
He'd
right
walk
thing
over you.
Benefited
If he
him.
benefited from it, he'd do the right
Yeah.
thing.
If people
We're
never see
reading
him-
a lot into the poor errand boy, but he does come off with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
He's very slick.
Yeah.
He's
Well,
very
he has
slick
that.
and
Even
very
when
clever.
he tells Rudy how it's done, who does he say to? Yes, Mrs. Matichek.
Uh-huh.
No, Mrs. Matichek. I mean, you see his duplicitous
And
nature.
then he finally tells her to F off over.
Yeah, but he's doing that for a purpose. He's not doing that to be duplicitous. He's doing that to mock her. Like, sure, Mrs. Matichek, anything you want. Mrs. Matichek, go screw yourself, Mrs. Matichek, and then, like, hangs up on her. Because at this point, he knows Mrs. Matichek was cheating on Mr. Matichek.
He knows she's in
But
the
he does that
outs.
before. He does that before the final.
Draw
call.
your own conclusions.
He's not here.
Well,
What?
plus he's got like extra clout now because he did
He's got extra
save
clout.
his
Right,
boss's life.
right.
So
That's how he got. That's how he gets his promotion. Remember?
Right.
He twists that into basically being made a clerk.
Right.
He uses that on Manichek.
Right.
But he's-
Neutral good. That's how I always see Peppy, as neutral good. He's good when he
No,
wants to be, but he's mainly neutral. He's got a good heart. He doesn't do anything malicious. In fact, he is genuinely concerned about Mr. Matichek. Like, those are genuine, like, the way he's portrayed is genuine emotions. When he sees Mr. Matichek going to hurt himself, he gets very upset. He goes to Kralik. I mean, that's, like, genuine concern. It's not just to move up in the world. But then, as soon as the dust settles, and he's done his bit of goodness, then he's like, aha, eureka, I'm going to advance, you know? So I see him more as, like, a neutral, good character who is not malicious
Can he
the
fight
way
with two hands?
Vadish is. Right.
And then he leaves with two girls.
Is it two or no? The one. He just says, "You see that girl over there?
Oh, is it?
I'm her Santa Claus."
Yeah,
I think that
yeah.
was the deal.
One of my favorite scenes in any movie is the end scene of Shop Around the Corner. I could watch it over and over and over again. The scene where Kralik knows that Maureen Sullivan is waiting for her dear friend, and he knows that it's him, and he's trying to, as John said earlier, feel her out because he wants to tell her. He's grown to become fond of her, and he's gonna propose to her, but he's not sure if she's gonna be okay with it. And so the scene is him talking about how he met her dear friend, Mr. Popkin, in the most clever and subtle, and he's saying it positively, and he's explaining the most horrible things about how old he is and how fat he is, and he thinks he can
He's
live
out
on
of
your
work.
salary quite
Yeah.
comfortably.
Yeah.
And I mean, and she's, as Mike said, she's trying to brave face it, but you can see it's all just
The
unraveling
air's
for
coming out of
her.
that balloon, yeah.
And it's just such a fun scene to watch, and it's so rewarding at the end when she finally realizes that it's him, and they're happy. They're both relieved that it's each other, and they'd always hoped it would be the other one. It's very
Well,
sweet.
at some point, sweetly, I forget what scene it was.
When she's sick in bed.
She says, "I think I was falling in love with you," or something like that.
She was horrible to him because she read those silly romance novels back when she was naive, and the heroine was always being mean to the hero, and so she thought that it would work with him. But now she realizes that she likes her dear friend. I think that's the moment for him when he
Thinks he's got.
thinks he's got it. Yeah.
But you haven't listened to it. It plays Ojichonia.
Were there any other favorite themes anybody wanted to touch on that we haven't already?
I just love the language when that one scene in the coffee shop when he goes the first meeting and she's like, don't sit with me, and then they get in the fight and she says,
Well, I really wouldn't care to scratch your surface, Mr. Crowley, because I know exactly what I'd find. Instead of a heart, a handbag. Instead of a soul, a suitcase. And instead of an intellect, a cigarette lighter, which doesn't work.
that he's hurt, but he's trying to not offend her. So he's like, well, that was beautifully stated. But I mean, her line, I just love that line because it's beautifully written.
A little side note about the movie is like background behind the scenes stuff. Before this movie, Sullivan and Stewart worked together very well. And actually, Stewart was best friends with, I want to say, who was Sullivan's first husband? Henry Fonda. At this point, Stewart had only been in like a couple of B movies and minor roles. And there was a movie at MGM that she was starring in, and she told them they should bring in Jimmy Stewart. And they had no idea who Jimmy Stewart was. And they brought him in to work with her, and apparently the director hated him at first because he's wet behind the ears, he doesn't know what he's doing, and she coached him. She acting coached him.
Wait, was this is Jimmy Stewart's breakout role?
No, it was a movie before this that he had done with her, which was called Next Time We Love. And that's how some people suspected that there was actually a thing between Sullivan and Stewart in real life.
Oh.
But apparently a lot of people credit Jimmy Stewart's career to her. Apparently she ended up dying of overdose on barbiturates. They called an accident. Apparently she was sick and not doing well, and her career had plummeted down.
She was no.
But apparently, even when she was a stage actress and she had done stuff with Jimmy Stewart, she had told people way early on that one day he was going to be a superstar.
Reviews. I, of course, love this movie. I picked it because I've seen it before. I love it. I wanted to talk about it. I want to see it again. I think it's the perfect balance of whimsical and romantic and sweet with a touch of reality. It's not saccharine. It's because it feels real. That makes.
How many stars?
Out of the patented Chicken Heart 1,000 star system.
Oh, I would give this 990 stars.
Wow. That means almost a perfect
I
movie.
think this is almost a perfect movie. It's beautifully written. The dialogue is subtle. There's, as I was saying before, there's wonderful moments where you learn hours worth of character development in just seconds worth of dialogue because it's that subtly written. I really think it's a great film.
I very much enjoy this film. I always have. I think that this is one of those films where I actually really appreciate the secondary characters even more than the main characters, which is not to say that I don't like Jimmy Stewart and is it Margaret or Marina Sullivan? Margaret Sullivan? I do. I appreciate them, but I love Pirovich and Vodich. They're just great characters, and they sort of complete a very well written story. And I do think the dialogue in this is superb. It's very well done. And I'd probably give it 750 stars. Oh, you're cheap. I like it. No, that's 3/4 awesome.
Yeah, I like the movie too. I didn't like the Pepe character. There's something about him, and not that that took away from the whole movie for me, but
Was that his voice?
yes, his yes, man. Oh, everything he had. There's a grating quality about him that I could never. I know that was a genre. I think you guys are right about that. It's a great story, great acting. I was going to give it 800 stars. That's my score, but I enjoyed it very much. I would recommend it.
It was a fun movie. I enjoyed it. It's another one of those Christmas movies because it happens to take place in Christmas. Like I feel like this is as much of a Christmas movie as Die Hard is. You know. But I would give it 750 stars. Like I did not dislike it, but I don't like it as much as Mary does. But I do suspect I'm going to be seeing it a lot.
Yeah, this is a great film, and it's beautifully written, and the ensemble cast is just as great as the actual love story, or it just adds a lot of depth to what you were saying before could be a saccharine story if it was handled differently, but it wasn't, and so it has a depth to it, and does a really good character analysis, and yeah, it's beautifully written, and some of the dialogue, like the one I quoted before, it's great, and it's a good character sketch also of the time period, and you really get to understand a whole different view of the world, because it's at this point now, what is that, 70 years ago? 75 years ago it was set. So it's a nice little glimpse of history into the everyday lives of people, and I would give it about 900 stars. That was really, really well done. So.
You guys have said everything I think we all like. This is one of those movies, we all like it. And I mean, even I'm not going to say anything bad about it, because I really don't have anything bad to say.
Yeah, we all
John did not
agree.
pick. He is not going to slam.
I am not going to slam this one. I said I like it because it's about ordinary people. It's also additionally bittersweet, even though it's made in Hollywood. At least I think it is, because it's set in Budapest, and I know what happens to Budapest in just a few years. Budapest will be a scene of. It's another horrific urban battle zone. Will be leveled in the war, as well as the fact that I often wonder how many of these characters are supposed to be Jewish, and that Hungary's Jewish population is absolutely decimated during this time period. During the war, a lot of these people are sent off to be killed. So now they don't know this at the time. That wasn't intentional, but to me, it's sort of like I would say when I watch movies, say set in Germany, made in the 30s or whatever, and you realize this world is gone. I guess is what I'm saying. You're seeing not just a period piece like you're saying, but this world is entirely gone. Literally in flames and death. It's literally going to be wiped away. You're never going to see this again. So it just adds to that as well. And I think that's why I like it about Little People, because it's this is what people are thinking of, not aware that this vast cataclysmic event is coming that's going to hit so many people. So I like it that way. I also would give this probably, say, 850 or 900 stars. Somewhere in there, depending on my mood at the time.
Well, that's not as bleak as John normally is.
I'm just being honest with you guys,
That's all good.
We wanted to.
So what's our next movie?
And the next is going to be up to Jenny. So what have you got?
All right. Well, I hope no one kills me for this. I do love either my two favorite films from these sorts of eras are either the musicals or the book adaptations. So I want to go with my favorite adaptation of one of my favorite novels, which is A Tale of Two Cities with Ronald Colman.
Yay!
Or the musical? We don't have an option?
No.
Oh.
Is there a musical version of A Tale of Two Cities?
I think there is,
How long
but
is A Tale of Two Cities?
I've never seen it. It's
Is it good?
18 chapters,
He's great.
It's
72
an ordinary,
hours.
No, it's an ordinary movie. It's
My
I'm
next
excited
movie
to
will be
see
North
it.
and South.
Miniseries?
Nice. All right. So, do you even know what year that is? I've never seen this.
Let me set
All right.
up
Well,
my
for
notes.
now, we'll sign off, but say yes. Next movie then will be A Tale of Two Cities. Join us next time.